Good morning, good evening. My name is Małgorzata Pakier and I welcome you at our discussion in the cycle to understand memory between genres. Today we will talk about images of war. The organizer of the discussion cycle is the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity, which is an international institution celebrating this year its 20th anniversary. It is based in Warsaw and it is doing educational and cultural work dealing with the history and the memory of the 20th century Europe. It is the organizer and our partner is the Dom w Alejach. The meeting will be in English. It is also translated to Polish. Jeśli potrzebują Państwo tłumaczenia na polski, to można wziąć słuchawki i skorzystać z tego. And now let me introduce our great guests. They are Keith Lowe, who is a writer and historian interested in World War II, whose works have been translated into more than 20 languages worldwide. Polish readers may best know your book Dziki Continent, Savage Continent, but also numerous other your books were discussed in Poland too. And Tomasz Szerszeń is an essayist, cultural anthropologist, and visual artist. He is the chair of cultural anthropology and visual arts at the Polish Academy of Sciences. Both authors have been nominated and awarded with numerous prizes for their work. And the starting point for our discussion, there are books by Keith Lowe, Prisoners of History, What Monuments to the Second World War Tell Us About Our History and Ourselves. And it was printed by William Collins, and the book by Tomasz Szerszeń, Być gościem w Katastrofie, To be a Guest in Catastrophe, printed by Czarne within the series Dwutygodnik. Let me maybe start with a short question. Are you tired at looking at war images?
Yes. Am I tired of... yes, is the short answer. It's images of war it's traumatic looking at images of war repeatedly, especially photographs. The more you see, the more it sort of gets into your soul a little bit. So yes, I am tired. I wish I didn't have to, but I feel like it's something important to look. So I carry on.
This is the ethics of looking, yeah. We will be talking about that. And you, Tomasz?
Maybe I will also answer in the same way, a little bit stressing this ethical aspect. Of course, I am tired, but it doesn't matter because it's not about me, but rather it's about what is going on and how we see it than my feelings. So.
Well, I myself can say that I have a self-defense mechanism, so I am not looking because it's too difficult. So today we will be talking about the ethical and moral dimension of looking or not looking at war imagery and how these images, pictures, memorials and artworks are involved in various kinds of memory politics. And we are meeting in Warsaw, a city that is marked by numerous memorial plaques devoted to the victims of World War II, to the civil victims of World War II. And where until today, flowers and candles are placed a few times a year on several various occasions, which shows how alive this memory is. The two books will be our guidelines today through the discourses and narratives of World War II and the current war in Ukraine, which shape these discourses. They shape the modern post-war and present-day culture we live in. They show that war, its memory and the fear of it, is one of the central phenomena shaping our culture. So Keith Lowe is doing a tour of World War II monuments across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And Tomasz Szerszeń writes about, I will quote you, looking, decolonization, and art in the face of disintegration. So both your books could be seen as anthropological and philosophical essays about war and the imprint of war on culture and on human conditions. So please tell us, why did you choose to focus on images in your reflection of war? And what was the core questions, the first impulse that guided you when choosing this topic, and why the essay form? Maybe Keith, you will start.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I've been writing about World War II for 20 years or something, and every time I go to another country, I see all these monuments, and after a while, you start to see patterns in them. You start to see a common language in the different memorials, even though when you go to a different country, it might be saying a completely different story to the ones that you're used to. So you have these differences and these similarities, and the tension between that I thought was really interesting. So in my book, I group the different kinds of memorials by the sort of images they're showing. So I start off with images of Armageddon, the end of the world. You know, the Second World War was so destructive; it destroyed everything. It was like an Armageddon, an apocalypse. And then I go on, I talk about images of victimhood. That's a very common throughout all the countries which were affected by the war. Victimhood is a common theme. Heroism is another common theme. Then, of course, you can't have heroes and victims without the third one of the group, which is the monster, the perpetrator, which, you know, people don't make monuments to perpetrators, but nevertheless
I was surprised
they are.
by that section too. Yeah.
Yes, they're there present, whether you want them to be or not, or their absence is also something which you feel. And then finally, there's a section on the sort of, when you come out of the Second World War, the rebuilding, the sort of rebirth, the phoenix rising from the ashes is another common theme. So, but within those themes, they're very different if you're in Korea to if you're in, I don't know, Pennsylvania or somewhere. They're completely different attitudes to how you're going to produce these images. That, I think, is really fascinating. So that's why I chose, you know, because monuments, they are as much about the people who put them up as they are about what they're supposed to be representing. So they're as much about the present when they're erected as they are about the past, which is another tension. And that's where the politics comes in.
Yes. And also the afterlife of the monuments.
Yes.
The spectators, yes. And Tomasz?
So if you ask me about the path that leads me to write this book, I have to come back to my previous book, which is called Wszystkie wojny świata, and it was written 4 years ago, yes, and I'm focusing there more about, it's kind of multi-layered essay, which I'm focusing more on this kind of blurred memory and some kind of traces of different conflicts and also different catastrophes. And when full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine begins, I was in some way prepared to react in some way, but also there is this more personal link that I was preparing to have a kind of literary residence in Kharkiv. So it was a case of 1 month, and when the war begins, it's like it started well, it automatically was cancelled. So I still feel like I'm prepared in some way, and in other I've got this kind of obligation to do something, and also this is like maybe a little bit like the way I'm thinking about the role of humanities and art as kind of not in very interventive way, interventionist way, but more like, but also that we need to react, especially today in this context of like war, like many crises which are like taking, framing our living, and I feel that. So I feel that I need to react in some way, and why I choose images, because that's this images are like, the word of images is something which is which I'm part of it, in the sense that my experience is not the experience of people who are like under the siege somewhere in Mariupol or like Kiev, or I'm not like, my experience is not the experience of people who are being shelled. So I think that's here is, I've still got in mind this very important question: who have the right to speak? And I think that I want to speak. It's an important question because yeah, it's which we usually ask ourselves now, especially now. I feel it's I heard very often this question: who have the right to speak? And I think this is a question which is very important, but also ambivalent, because on one hand it's well, it could like help well, because it's against the abuse of well, because it's very often that somebody abused and taking somebody's voice. But on the other hand, when we are like too, sometimes it's also the question of silence ourselves. So I feel that I need to use my voice in some way to tell something about the war, but in the way that will not be abusive in any sense. So I want to speak about images, because images is something which is mediating between me and the war, the people who are there. So I'm not talking about in this book about like experience as a, it's not like reporter book from the like you know, non-fiction reporters type, but it's like more essay, which like try to make this kind of intellectual, but also in some way effective reflection about what we see, how art reacts in times of war, what are the images, the discourses which are linked with the war, with this war in Ukraine.
Thank you. It's very interesting. So we talked today about two wars, World War II and the war in Ukraine. We have the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. So we should ask what's parallel to the past and what's new. And as you said, we will be not talking about the events. We are not only historians, but we are also reflecting on how culture is digesting the events and how culture is digesting the war. And I mean here in terms of what media are used, who are the actors who are using various kinds of media and formats, what are the genres that are used to show the war, and also what is being shown and what remains unseen.
Well, I'll start that. A few months ago, I met the director of the World War II Museum in Kiev, Yuri Savchuk. And he's doing something really interesting, which is, he's got this World War II museum, which used to be a very sort of Soviet museum, all about the glory of the Red Army and so on. And over the years since 2014, he's been changing it to make a more of a Ukrainian story rather than a Soviet story. But since 2022, he's now actually documenting the current war, and he's got that going side by side with World War II. So the two things are literally side by side in the same museum, and that's really interesting. So there's a sort of common story there, which is about a sort of Soviet or Russian attempt to destroy Ukrainian identity, which, I mean, as Thomas knows, it predates World War II. From the 1930s, isn't it? Or possibly even before in the Russian Empire, this idea of trying to destroy Ukrainian culture. So that's a common theme, which is going all the way through the century. But then, of course, there are some huge differences. I mean, I think it's dangerous drawing parallels sometimes. I mean, that is what Vladimir Putin does in his wonderful speeches about World War II. He's trying to draw parallels, which are false parallels, in order to justify what he's doing now. So you have to be careful when you're drawing parallels with the past, I think.
I remember the day when the war in Ukraine broke out, looking at people on buses, in trams, watching the phones and looking at the images, and I think that we were all shocked seeing that these images remind the horrors of the past, right? And as you wrote, Tomasz, the very purpose, that we thought that present-day wars would be very technologically advanced and very precise in striking only the military goals, while the purpose of war as such, as you write, is simply to inflict suffering. Can you say something about the new media and how the war in Ukraine is being shown?
Yes, maybe I will get back what you said, because it's really interesting what you said about this Kiev museum, and I think it's that there is this impulse to reinvent history, looking at what is going on now, and sometimes, of course, it could be a trap in some way, but I feel that this gesture you mentioned of like making a documentation of current war in the building devoted to Second World War is interesting in some way, and I think that it's that maybe there are some aspects of our looking at World War II that will change a little bit while we because of this current war in Ukraine. The first thing I think is this question of images, because this war is different because of this omnipresence of images, and I feel that maybe we will now look more at Second World War in this context of also chasing this propaganda abuses, like in images also. That's the first thing. Another is that I feel that this war in Ukraine and is the first, which is like framing a little bit like the first war in the context of ecological catastrophe, climate crisis. And also I think that I've heard some opinion like that maybe we should look at Second World War also in this context of ecology, and I'm just trying to think, but I think that there are some paths which could like a little bit reinvent our looking at Second World War. I'm not, and another thing is what you what you mentioned, that in Poland, that of course the parallels are false, but that's true what you said, that at the beginning of full-scale invasion, people really like feel that like for a moment here, like something like they're like back to history, and that was interesting in some way. This was like short moment, but really like all the shadows, you know, like are back, and you know that we are facing the same. Of course, it's false, but there was this very strong impression here, which was real, I think, for the moment.
But indeed, the direction is mutual. So not only we are thinking about this present world through the prism of World War II, but also this world now, and for example, the environmental questions
It's
are
like,
taking us back to look anew at.
of course, that it's like it's working in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So there is such notion in memory studies, multi-directional memory. It is coined by the American literary and memory scholar Michael Rothberg, and he wrote that the Holocaust memory in the United States was used as an example upon which the previously absent memories, especially this memory of slavery, could be built. And in this way, one group's memory could be helpful to develop, to construct new cultural memory, and help another group of victims to become visible. I was thinking about this notion when reading about works of artists in Ukraine. Well, you mentioned the museum in Ukraine, and Tomasz also wrote about works like Mariana Kijanowska's Babi Yar Voices, a dramatic polyphonic poem, or Nikita Kadan's Drawing Sewers Pogrom. Could you tell something about it? And I was also curious whether they were done, the works made before the outbreak.
They were both like the book, the the book of Kijanowska, and the pictures of Kadan was made just before the outbreak of full-scale invasion. It was like 2017, 2018, but it was in this context of invasion of the East Ukraine, but not in the context of full-scale war. And I think that 2022 changes the meaning of these works, because both were like about like more about like Jewish Ukrainian memory, also with some Polish traces, like in both, because Kijanowska book is referred to Adam Mickiewicz dziady in the form, and on the other hand, this pictures of Kadan was he like redraw the photos from pogrom in 1931 in Lviv. So it's like the common story of like Jewish, Polish, Ukrainian, German, like in different like proportions. But I think that when we think about this work now in this new context, I think that it shows that this suffering is like more universal. I think that it's not only like in case of Babi Yar like Jewish, but also like this work shows that it's like it becomes more this kind of this context, this frame of suffering becomes more universal. And there is like very nice very nice phrase by Nikita Kadan, the author of one of these works, that he said that the bones were mixed together and we couldn't separate it. So it's a little bit about it, that there are the victims are like we couldn't like separate the suffering, like the suffering is something like more universal, which is difficult to split for. I think it's that's the context, and well, of course, I think that I've got this strong conviction that this word changes some the meaning of some works as well as some discourses. We could see like that there is different. There is some kind of rethinking, for example, of the tradition of First Rzeczpospolita, because of this, because the like, Ukrainians start to make some reference to some Ukrainian historians like start to make some deeper references to like our common past. So it's. I think that there are some like, and there are different contexts of like, for example, that this wave of Ukrainian refugees at the beginning of the war push us to think about our own of Polish people being refugees from the east, like in '35. So it's. I think that there are some. I mean, there are some. That history is still in. We still rewrite it because of what is going on now.
Yeah, and also you mentioned, you said at the beginning about these changes of perspectives. So here, the artists, for example, they from being witnesses.
Yeah, of course.
They turned into the role.
Yeah, of course. I didn't mention this. Is of course it's important that like that both works were made. You mentioned were made in this position of being more distant, like, and now this. Yeah, it's more like this. It's not so distant now because yeah. It's important that they are part of it now in some way.
I would like to ask you now to talk a bit about the ethical limits of photography of war. So, Keith, for example, one of the many places you have visited was Auschwitz, and you analyze in your book the visitors' behavior, not just picnicking, because as you write, people have to eat. But also taking selfies with Auschwitz and the Birkenau Gate in the background. So what is the moral and ethical significance of such gestures? Also, do you think that, for example, the museum's management should consider putting some limits to the number of visitors?
Wow, yes. The issue of photography is quite a tricky one, because I know that when people go to it's a terrible sight. The stories there are awful and overwhelming, and if you take your camera with you, you can sort of hide behind it. If you're taking pictures of Auschwitz-Birkenau, for example, you're distancing yourself from the horror by doing that. So there is that. I mean, I found myself doing this, rather than standing and feeling the horror of the place. I busy myself. I go around and I take pictures. I tell myself it's for research, so it's okay. But really, I know that it's a way of keeping distant, protecting myself. If you're taking selfies, that's a slightly different thing, because you're then putting yourself into the picture. So it really depends on what your intentions are when you're doing that. If you are deliberately trying to put yourself in the picture sort of as a way of, I don't know, showing solidarity or saying, I am here with the pain, I stand with the generations who died here, that's one thing. But I don't think that's how most people are doing it. I think really places like, I mean, how many people visit Auschwitz a year? 2 million or something? And there's a lot of people go through there. It's kind of part of the tourist trail. You know, it's like going to the Uffizi in Florence or something. It's something to do when you're on holiday in Poland. Obviously, that's not all, but there's a minority of people are going with that kind of attitude. But you know, you take the selfie, you show that you were there, and then you move on to an art gallery. It's distasteful, and it's also, I think, part of this distancing. You know, 80 years ago, it happened to a generation that are long gone. We can pretend that it's ancient history, and it's just like it's like visiting the London dungeons, you know, where they show all these torture instruments from the 14th century. It was the 14th century. It's just like an interesting horror story from the past, and then we can laugh about it. 80 years ago is not quite so far away as we think it is. So, but maybe if you're I don't know, a 17-year-old, maybe it feels like ancient history. Maybe it doesn't feel real. In which case, why not take a selfie?
Yeah, on the other hand, these places are so overwhelming. I remember being there as a teenager when mobiles were actually not there to help me looking at that. And maybe indeed, I just thought when you were telling that it is a healing strategy to go to some art gallery or do shopping afterwards because it's just too much of it.
Yeah, it is over. I mean, I find it overwhelming, and I'm used to doing. I've been to dozens of concentration camps, too many. It feels like, and it is overwhelming. But it should be overwhelming. It should. If we are inured to this, then what does that say about us? You know, we should find it horrific, and we should go away and sit feeling depressed afterwards. You know, that's part of the process. This idea of never again can only start with you feeling bad about it. People don't like to feel bad, so they go shopping.
Yeah. Exactly, and I will maybe add one more thing, that one more small context. There is this series in Netflix which is called The Dark Tourist. And of course, maybe it's not very referring to Auschwitz, but it shows people who are like finding some pleasure in tracing and making some selfie in places of destruction, or like also like Fukushima or some kind of strange places. Of course, this context of like such a memorial place like Auschwitz is a little bit different, but also there is this specific kind of, well, how to say it, attitude towards history of suffering.
And Tomasz, yeah, the title of your book is Być gościem w katastrofie, to be a guest in a catastrophe. And actually, Susan Sontag is one of the ghosts that is omnipresent there, and her idea that simply taking a photo of violence and looking at the photo is also repeating an act of violence. How does it refer to the war in Ukraine? Do you think that her reflection is still valid?
Well, I think it is in some way. Of course, I'm trying. It's not like it's like very general frame here. It's not like I'm not writing a lot about her, and of course, to be honest, I'm critical of some aspects of her thinking, as her point of well, the place from which she speaks is very like it's very privileged in many ways, and her tone is very didactic. So these are the things which are maybe not very well. I've got some problem with it, but of course her reflection about like role of media and like about this kind of pornography. Of looking at others suffering. It's still here, and even it's more visible now because of this omnipresence of images, or because of social media. It's more striking than like 25 years ago when she was like writing it in the context of like war in Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and like first war in Iraq. Now I feel it's much more visible, much more striking, and the title is Being Guest in Catastrophe. Maybe guest is something very positive. Maybe we should say like more, there is this word bystander, which is like used very often in like reflection about Holocaust. It's more not so, it's not so positive. It's like very ambivalent, and maybe it's, but well, it's maybe this guest is like maybe more personal. Maybe it's like I want us to be a guest rather than as an act of this positive, like somebody who also like helps. But you know, it's, I think that when we look at like these wars, like in what is going on in Gaza, or like what is going on in Ukraine, we are rather bystanders. Like in this case, that's. It's many people like it's difficult to say, but I'm not very positive about it.
But the taking of an image, if you're seeing an act of violence and you're taking a photograph of it, is that where's the ethical boundary there? You're not helping, or you're not you're. And someone's suffering, presumably,
yeah,
and you're taking photographs of it. That's adding to the suffering, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. It's. I mean, like, maybe I wasn't precise enough. I want to say about bystanders, about looking only. But if you're taking a photo of someone else suffering, of course, is something which is not a vertical situation, but on the other hand, sometimes it's the only way to witness the situation. I don't know, it's very complicated, and this war in Ukraine shows a whole spectrum of it, that, for example, these images are like, on one hand, like they are transferring trauma, and they are also very abusing, but on the other hand, sometimes they help to like make precise investigation what was going on. This is like very ambivalent, but I was very surprised. For example, there is this kind of ethical turn. Like, for example, there is one of the photo reporters, Ukrainian photo reporters. He said that he never make photos of abandoned somebody else's property, because he's not because of course it's a kind act of violence, but also because of he don't want to. Because of the looted, like possibility of that this somebody will steal something or loot this. You know, it's very pragmatic, but also it makes sense in some way. And there are a lot of very strange and very unconventional ways that people are thinking now about images in context of war.
Yes, and for example, this case you discussed about this cut hand, the photo was taken of it, and then it was forwarded and shared with other people, and it was an act of solidarity, of spreading word about what's going on, and solidarity. So in this context, again, the photo has a different...
It was very violent, but the intention of Russian intention was violence to make something, but Ukraine like reversed the sense and making this kind of solidarity gesture that people are how to explain it, you know. But
I mean, this is not something that we as documenters are divorced from. You know, when it's not only other people who are doing this. We're involved in this too. I mean, I remember a time when I was interviewing a woman for my Cheeky Continent book, she was a Polish woman who had been a forced labourer in Germany, and she was there during the bombing of Hamburg, and witnessed this horrendous firestorm and the mass death afterwards. And when I was interviewing her, she broke down in tears. She was crying. Her memory was all over the place. She was remembering one image and then another image, and there was horror. And then she thought she was in some other place and was remembering something from Poland. And I was just a very naive young historian that hadn't interviewed so many people. I didn't recognize that these were signs of kind of trauma. She had not processed this information. It wasn't a nice, neat story like most interviews are. It was all over the place. And I was giving her back the trauma by asking her these questions. And a part of me was horrified by what I was doing. I was like, just leave this poor woman alone. Stop asking her questions. But the other part of me was thinking, this is great material. I have to put it in my book. You know, so I am there. I'm being a perpetrator, and it's.
This is a very difficult distinction between being re-traumatized and, on the other hand, like that you get some facts which are like. This is between witness and between violence, something which is very sometimes this border is blurred between two. So if you have yeah.
Yes, I remember similar questions when I was attending a school of writing nonfiction, and how you treat the people that you deal with, and they are a story for you, and there's always this question of, if you show the story, whether this property will be looted, right, to put it together. I would like to ask you now about the role of art in all that. We were talking about photography. What about art? We can see that today there is, for example, more poetry being written today in the times of crisis, not just the wars that are going on, but also the climate changes, the crisis of democracy, the civilizational challenges, the AI, and the big question what it is and what it will bring to us. So artistic creation is more active today, it feels to me. And so the question is why? Why art is starting playing a role? What kind of possibilities of expression, of expressing what it gives to us? Maybe I will begin with you, Tomasz, because with the war in Ukraine, we are going into the events. And you are writing, for example, about an artist who creates in Mariupol during it being besieged.
Maybe I will answer a question in this. I will start with this more general dimension that I think that yes, it's art is kind of existential gesture and existential stamp, and because people feel so powerlessness, and so they feel that their agency is very limited, and also they feel there's so much disinformation. I think that art is kind of, because it's material, it's kind of also you see the agency of somebody when. Maybe I'm making more psychological frame, but I feel it's like this a little bit. That's And also, I think that when we look at, like, for example, Ukrainian art in times of created in times of war, I think it shows like the difference between like media images or images in social medias or photo reportage and like more art and artistic answers that. Like these artistic answers are like going deeper, of course, and there are the artists are sometimes problematizing also this very act of looking, for example, the very act of witnessing, or sometimes they're like, yeah, so the works are very personal. So also like, yeah.
I think it is striking that these are often moments when you are in the survival mode.
Yeah, of course.
And yet you are able to such a transgression, yes, like to create art, which is from a different.
But art is also like a form of survival, method, because there is something which remains, like in some way, and I feel it. Maybe it's like too philosophical, but I feel like when we come back, for example, to very extremely liminal situation, like let's say Warsaw Ghetto. There are like art which was like created in Warsaw Ghetto, or even in Auschwitz. Like we know some like photographies, like or some even some pictures which was done there. So like, there are some. This is a kind of existential gesture, I think, very, very, very strong. Of course, like I also think that in this precise case of images of war, that people feel sometimes that this is also response to this omnipresence of these media images also. Like, I think that it works like this, but not every but it's I want for like to finish, like I want to also say that not every artist are so active. There are many who are mute in times of war. Like I can say like. There are some of them which feels that they need to speak, they need to create, and there are many who are like feel totally powerlessness and totally like that there is no space for creating something. So it's.
Yeah, I would like to add. I mean, you mentioned artists in the Warsaw Ghetto. The place that really struck me in terms of art is Theresienstadt. They have a whole art gallery there of I mean, they had some amazing artists who were amongst the prominenten there, and they have produced some incredible art. And there's a whole massive one barrack block filled with all this artwork, and it's really moving. And I think in times of great stress and great powerlessness, like you said, art can be a form of resistance to show, you know, I'm still alive, I'm still here, I'm still doing it.
That's the word I was
right.
looking for.
And it's also a form of sort of processing it. You know, you're going through some horrible stuff. Is it just meaningless? Or can you try and transform it into something, give some kind of meaning to your experience of being a victim or being powerless? Try and transform this horrible feeling into something positive, which can then be transmitted later through the generations, and bear witness to what you've suffered.
Yeah, and how is it with the memorials? How do they are also works of art, and in the afterlife, after the war, when the new life, new world begins, how do they help? Can we say that they tell the world anew, that they try to restore some values?
Well, I mean, that's the idea. It's not always the reality.
Well, yesterday during the lecture, you said that there can be also the wrong history lessons.
There can be the wrong history. Exactly. I mean, the point of making a monument after the war is finished is to give a focus for people to come, for example, for commemorations. It's like a container for all the emotion, for all the sadness of remembering the people you've lost, for example. You have a place that you can go to. You might not know where they're buried, but you have a place that you can go to and lay some flowers. So it's a way of containing a nation's emotion, or not necessarily a community of some sort. It contains their emotion. But the people who put up monuments often want to portray the values which are important to us. So it's not just about, this is a sad thing, let's remember it. They want to show what are the things we've been fighting for. And sometimes their image of what you've been fighting for is not the same as other people's image. And that's where it becomes a political problem. And victimhood is also can be used as a political tool to raise people's emotions so that they can fight again. So rather than never again, you're saying yes again, in a way, sometimes.
So there is a whole section in your book about rebirth. So how nations try to find a new life after that. Can you tell us something about this?
Well, I mean, real rebirth is about processing the past, coming to terms with it, and then moving onto something different, something new, and leaving the past behind. So there are quite a few monuments which do that fairly successfully. I mean, the one that springs to mind that I wrote about I'll tell you a couple. So there's one, the mural in the Security Council chamber in the United Nations. They have this great mural under which the politicians all sit, which shows the image of the darkness of the war with all these sort of dark colors and people in chains and so on. And they're reaching up to a brighter world where there are children playing and so on. And the central image is of a phoenix rising from its own dead body. So it's a sort of, we've come out of this terrible thing, but we can make a brighter world. It's a sort of nice, positive image. The other one I wanted to mention is Coventry Cathedral, which was bombed by the Luftwaffe in 1940, completely destroyed. The whole of Coventry was completely destroyed. But the central symbol of the city was this medieval cathedral. Beautiful cathedral was left in ruins. And rather than rebuild it, they've left the ruins as they are, but they've built a new church next to it, a little bit like churches quite often do this. The Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church in Berlin is another example. You have the old world there, which has been destroyed, but you have a new world next to it, which has risen up. And so we remember the terror which has happened, but we're not going to let it define us. We will rise up again, like this church, like the phoenix.
So the Brits again win. Pardon my joke.
The Brits. We like to think we always win, but we don't.
No, sorry for that. I like very well, you mentioned the artists being mute, and I like very much the monuments in your work that speak with silence. I like very much the Korean girl sitting in front of the Japanese embassy and just sitting and looking. Can you say something about that too?
Well, yeah, I know you like that one. I find that one quite disturbing, actually, because it's an image of a young girl sitting silently, just looking. She's got a quite neutral expression on her face, but her eyes are kind of accusing. And she's sat directly opposite the Japanese embassy in Seoul, in Korea, and she's staring at it. And she represents a comfort woman, which is one of these forced prostitutes who were taken by the Japanese army. And, I mean, it's a very powerful image, but it's, you know, it's not 1945 anymore. It's very accusatory, and it's not good for international relations. And the Japanese have repeatedly apologized about the crimes they committed in Korea. They've tried to put reparations through. There are different factions in Japan. Some people deny it, and other people are very apologetic. But the general tone, I think, is an attempt to come to some kind of reconciliation. And that monument is like a rejection of that conciliation. It's saying, no, we are victims, we will always be victims, and we're holding on to our victimhood. It's difficult to criticize it because these women are victims, and it was horrendous what happened to them, and that should be remembered. But at the same time, putting it opposite the Japanese embassy is a step too far for me.
So we are speaking now not only about the message, the very work of art sense, but also how it's interpreted over the years and how it necessarily needs to be interpreted within the current socio-political context. Yes. So maybe we now move a bit to the politics of memory, so to say, and the topic of domination and majority versus minority discourses. So I would like to ask you, Tomasz, about decolonization. It is a very important theme in your work. So what are the various ways, various directions that the Ukrainian artists are using the decolonial discourse to make their statements, and how they are playing also with the colonial discourse?
Well, yeah, I feel that it's like very important like motive, but I also feel that like looking, because like my book was published like at the beginning of 2024. And was written in 2023, and I feel that this decolonial context, is like still very valid, but maybe it's not so discussed as at the beginning. Now it's not. I feel that this discussion is like become a little bit limited now. But it's this is my like maybe own. Remark, and yeah, of course, it's very very vivid, and is visible in the works of some of the Ukrainian artists. And for example, what is interesting that they're trying to speak their very own voice, to to show their very, very specific and a little bit paradoxical position, that they are like at the same time like in the position of being oppressed by imperial power, but at the same time they are like part of the like also in some way West. So it's like very. It's very different than like when we think about like this decolonial context in the colonial term in this context of global South, and that's also produced some misunderstandings from the beginning between like global South and Ukraine, because it was very difficult to understand for like many people from the many thinkers or artists from global South that like. Ukrainians are not the same West as, for example, like I don't know, but yeah, and they're also like oppressed by imperial Russia's imperial power, like which is not so obvious sometimes, because like when we come back to Soviet Union, there was this kind of alliance. It's not so like between many countries from global south and like many countries from this eastern part of like Iron Curtain. So there are many layers of misunderstanding, but I think that I saw also a very interesting wave of very radical thinking and or radical art, which is created by women, Ukrainian women, rather young, in transit, usually in transit between like Western academias or Western art institutions and current move between these institutions and Ukraine, and they are in the move all the time, and they are like transgressing their like positions as like there are very typical positions as women also, but also as East-West. They are like trying to change this, or not, maybe not change, but how to say it, to make some use, to show that these distinctions are sometimes useless, like East-West, like that. So this is interesting for me, and of course this question of Russian language is and Soviet heritage. There are many layers of this process of the colonization, the colonial thinking, but also like sometimes very deep critique of Western attitude, which like in this sense that there is this kind of colonial thinking that Ukraine is something like in between, and it's like it's not defined, and there are like many orientalistic like yeah, it's like myths and some, or let's say like false convictions. Yeah.
You also wrote about women, or the visibility of non-binary persons in the army as political
kind of political movement. And it's interesting because like just before the full-scale invasion starts, there was like for example in Kharkiv there was like the Pride Parade was being totally how to say spacyfikowane, rozbite, pacified by like extreme right, and now the people with which are visibly LGBT and which create some kind of even they are like they are part of the Ukrainian army, and they are like talking about it, and so it changes totally. So I've got impressions sometimes like war. You know it very well, like making research and writing about like end of Second World War, that sometimes war changes or catastrophe changes this rules like a little bit, and I think that this happens in Ukraine. That like very homophobic situations was like cancelled momentary, and because they are building new kind of solidarity, and I think it's very positive, and well, I think we also like as a society could learn a lot from this, I think.
Mm-hmm. And if we are talking about the discourses of domination and the gender perspective, how could you describe, Keith, the landscape of the monuments to World War II from the gender perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you notice when you look at sort of hundreds of monuments is that the images of women on these monuments they're generally the victims. The sort of there's a sort of identification between the female and the nation, and so the sort of Marianne in France, or the motherland calling if you're Soviet. Or, the country is a sort of female entity, and the soldiers are kind of coming in and violating the nation. So the feminine is always the sort of victim, and the heroes are always the men. They're the guys with the swords who are doing the liberating and the saving the children and whatever. There are exceptions to this rule, of course. I mean, there were plenty of women who fought, particularly in the Red Army and the Soviet forces. So if you go to Kazakhstan, for example, there's quite a big memorial to the female resistance fight, the female sort of, not resistance fighters, soldiers who fought. So you do get occasionally this, but the general rule is that women are the victims and men are the perpetrators and the heroes. We've got a monument in London to the women of World War II, and there are no women on it. There are just, you have the uniforms of the women in the Air Force, the women in the Army, the women in the Navy. It's just their clothes hanging on pegs. It's kind of, it's supposed to be a monument to the women, and all you can show is their clothing. I mean, that's probably familiar with you, isn't it? So, yeah, women are not always portrayed in a way which is sort of sympathetic to the actual roles they did play during war, which were very significant in resistance organizations, in armies, in keeping the factories going, and so on.
Thank you. We don't have so much time more, but still there is one question at the end I would like to ask you about the so-called good practices. So in portraying, in telling about the war, in the images, the artistic works and the monuments, are there some works that you specifically like, that stayed in your thoughts? And do you have maybe some criteria that would say which work, which way of telling about war is right, which is wrong, which is more promising to resonate for longer and among more groups?
I'll start with that. For me, images which show war is a terrible thing and should be avoided. We've got this idea, never again. Yeah, we should be living by that, and images which give that sense. This is horrible, and let's do whatever we can to avoid this at all costs. They're important, and images which try to bring this about, try to bring it reconciliation, for example, or processing of pain into something more positive. Anything that can bring us away from war and towards peace, I think is a useful image. So, I mean, I mentioned that Korean one, that is an important processing of pain, but because it's opposite the Japanese embassy, it's antagonizing as well. So it's not moving away from war, it's causing problems in the present as well as the problems that it relates to in the past. So that's bad practice, I think, purely because of the positioning. Good practice is something like, my favorite monument is the monument to the bombing victims in Hamburg in the cemetery, where there are 40,000 people buried in mass graves in the cemetery, 4 gigantic graves, and in the center of this, they have a monument which shows it shows, it's like from the ancient Greek myth of the boat which goes across the river Styx to the underworld. And you have, at the back, you have the Greek god Charon steering, and you have in the boat are the sort of civilians of Hamburg who are going across to the land of the dead. And there are three sets of images. So the front, you've got an old man who's resigned to his fate, and he's looking forward to the land of the dead where he's going. He understands it's his time, and he's accepting it. So there's a feeling of acceptance there. Behind him, there's a woman and her child, and she's holding her child, who's got his hands over his eyes because it's too horrific. He can't see. So there's the image of trauma there, which is being acknowledged. And then just behind them is the third image. It's an image of a man, like a young, strong man, the sort of, the Nazi ideal, really, the young, strong man. But he's sitting there with his head in his hands. He's just like this. He's despairing. He's realized all of this manliness has come to nothing. It's this is what it's come to, mass death. So there's a processing of trauma, there's an acceptance, and there's a recognition of the failures of the ideas of the past, all in one image in the middle of these mass graves. So that, for me, is good practice. It shows a way to change the old ideas into some kind of acceptance, and then move on into the future.
Thank you.
Well, I will I don't have very precise answer to your question. Maybe I will only say that, like, as somebody who, we as the people who create some images, but also who think about images and see it. I mean, images in times of war, times of crisis. We need to be very there's this need for responsibility for this. And ethical consciousness, and also we need to stay close to facts. I think it's very important in this context of disinformation, and and we need to be reflective in the sense that we need to think about the consequences of how image can hurt, how image can save. Also, we need to be very make permanent reflection, how to say it. And maybe I will mention only one example of Polish artist like Magda Specht, who is from the beginning of full-scale invasion, she started to work with images founded in social media, but also in the internet generally. And her idea is to fight with disinformation, and she's making very deep, using very many different media's very deep investigations about what is fact, what is false, what is true, what is false, how the image was created, in what was the intention, what was the context. And it's interesting because her very difficult and and hard work in this field makes some very precise effects. Because, for example, she makes some investigation about the graves in Mariupol, because people it was very often that some people were buried, and the witnesses of it was killed, and there was no possible trace where to find it, for example. And making very deep research based on some fragments of video, even some photos found in she managed to find some like very places like where the graves are. Like it's a very small thing, but I can just say that there are like these possibilities of very precise effects sometimes. So like that art, or let's say if it's journalism or art, I don't know, but it could like sometimes help really not only like making some very like touching image, but also can really
Very practical.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I will turn now to our audiences. We have many great guests here. And if you would like to add something to the discussion or ask a question, you are very welcome now.
Hello. I would like to ask for advice. I have a conundrum that I'm carrying for a long time because I ask myself a lot of times, how do we get over war? Because in Poland, we like this victim mentality, but at the same time, it's hard to get young people to care about war because they see so much bad stuff on the internet, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, and how that is worse than the Holocaust and stuff like that. And I think it's hard to like deal with that. And if you have any advice how we can talk to young people and old people and find a middle ground. Thank you.
I wish I had all the answers. That's why I'm a historian, not a politician. I think a small part of the answer, when thinking about history, I mean that's sort of my field. It's important to, if you're going to move on, you have to acknowledge the things that you did. So I always begin by acknowledging the crimes that were committed by British soldiers, British airmen. You know, bombing civilians is a war crime. You know, handing over prisoners to Tito or to the Soviets, knowing that they're going to be executed. That's not ethical. And that's on us. We did that. My people did that. And we have to acknowledge that before we start talking about how heroic we were liberating Europe and so on. Because it's only by acknowledging the bad things alongside the good that you're able to appreciate the value of the good stuff. Nobody is black and white, sort of good or bad. You know, everybody's got a mixture in them, and you need to acknowledge all sides of you, not just the bits that you want the world to see. So I would like every country to do that. If we all say, you know, confess our sins. I mean, we're in a Catholic country. That's what the meaning of reparations and moving forward is. You first of all have to confess your sins, and once you've done that, you're free to move on. But if you don't do it, you're never free to move on. And this is one of the problems with the current conflict in Ukraine. The Russian side of things, the Putin narrative, is that they're only the victims and the heroes. They never did anything wrong. You can't criticize the Red Army because they were all heroes. If you think like that, you will never be able to move on. So, yeah, confess your sins. Go to church tomorrow.
I can only agree with Keith. I think it should touch it very like deeply. And what I only can add that we need like permanent education, and but this kind of education that involves everybody, like which that. And this kind of lesson that history is like also is contemporary. That not in the sense that that it's not a past, but in the sense that we still need to learn from history and need to look at it and yeah. Because if we are becoming too distant, it's like we are not this affective relation is broken, and I think it's difficult to taking care or thinking about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's I think that we need to permanently speak about, educate ourselves, not in this manner that sometimes it's good. This oblivion is also good, and some not to forget also. But I mean that this kind of critical reflection, maybe this is the word. We need to have it still, thinking about past, and so this critical attitude maybe is maybe this is the right expression, that we need to have this critical attitude.
It's difficult because there are so many voices calling you to, as a young person, calling you to step up and be a hero. You could be in a war and be a hero. War is glorious. These people are evil, so we need to fight against them. There's all these sort of voices all the time, and it's very difficult when you have all that to sound the voice of peace, because it's a bit boring in comparison. So yeah, it's a difficult problem. Yeah.
I hope, Agnieszka, that your conundrum is gone now. Barbara.
I wonder if you could speak to the use of shame and humiliation in the current context of globalized conflict and war. I sometimes wonder if we don't pay any attention to the power of humiliation, or how we're not careful about what it is by raising further tensions, but also, and I'm wondering if it's a very male thing or a very masculine stick to beat people with, to raise tension.
Do you mean the feeling of your own humiliation, or the deliberate infliction of humiliation?
I think it's both. I wonder if when you inflict humiliation, at some level, it's nearly always mirrored back to you. So it can be that if you humiliate me, say that me or my country is not capable, is evil, or it's unjust, or it has perpetrated huge injustices around that. So the perception of your country as something as less than human, and then is the attitude to that to just go?
Well, I mean, this is part of the problem today with Ukraine and Russia and so on. The Russians, as a people, feel humiliated by the last 20, 30 years. Since the fall of their great Soviet Union, which was, if you have no agency in your life, the last resort for you is the idea of the nation as something, at least I'm part of something great and glorious. And if that's taken away from you, you've got nothing left. And that's kind of what happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union to a degree, on a sort of social, psychological level. And Putin has given hope for a new, make Russia great again kind of narrative. And it works to a certain degree. The same thing's happening in America. Make America great again, based on sort of assumptions of humiliation. It's the humiliated people, the sort of lower demographics who are struggling in life have found somebody who's going to make them feel great again because they've been humiliated in the past. And they feel, that the sort of Western liberal ideas of sort of liberal democracy has been ridiculing them for years, and now they've got their chance to stand up again and be part of this great, glorious new America. These are very important emotions that need to be dealt with. The problem is that jumping on a bandwagon in the idea that you're going to find some greatness it's an illusion. But better than they imagine better an illusion than nothing at all, which is what they had before. That's my opinion on it. I don't know if you think something differently.
I also wanted to ask you a question about how to learn about war, because learning about war through monuments and commemoration plaques is a very official, curated way of learning about the bad things that happened in the past, and we cannot wait for the monuments for the war in Ukraine to learn about it, because it's happening now. So you're getting the news from memes, images, very instantaneous. So I was wondering if you think there is a proper way to learn about history and war, and if so, then what it is or what should it be?
That's a really tricky question.
Maybe now there is like this time for very democratic monuments, democratic grassroots a little bit, yeah. Yeah, like there are some things like this. It's more artistic or something like this, but I think it is happening that there's kind of memorials of because now it's interesting also because we can concentrate on this kind of memory or which is very fresh and which is not being by official discourses so it's interesting moment to see what is going on. I think that it's every time like these moments of transitions or moments of it was 1945, the moment when Second World War finished. It was really interesting because there was still many possibilities and the memory was so alive and then there comes this moment of officialize this memory. And we also observe it in Poland that, for example, looking back, going back to memory of Holocaust in Poland, that at the beginning it was very vivid and also this, and then it was from
it's crystallizing.
Crystallized, yeah,
some narratives. Yeah.
When we come back to, for example, these moments when there was this very this kind of memorization in the ruins of Warsaw Ghetto, 46, 47, and then it becomes when the monuments was erected, it becomes more officialized. And there are many examples like that. So I think that now we can, this moment is interesting to look at what is more from grassroots,
Make use of the richness, maybe. Yeah, that's well put. Thank you very much. It's a very awkward word in the context of our discussion, but it's really been a great pleasure talking to you and also reading your books. I want to show them once again. Tomasz Szerszeń, Być gościem w Katastrofie, To be a guest in Catastrophe. and Keith Lowe, Prisoners of History. They are two wonderful, very insightful essays, and please read them if you haven't done so yet. Please also visit our website, the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity. We are very happy we could have you as our guests, and you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.